The sound of rain hitting the tin roof was the first thing Elena heard every morning. She lived in a small house at the edge of town, where the streets turned from pavement to gravel, and where most people knew each other by name. Her father owned a small repair shop, the kind of place where people brought broken toasters, old radios, and things they couldn't quite throw away but didn't know how to fix themselves. Elena was different from other kids in town. While they played soccer in the streets or rode their bikes to the beach, she spent hours sitting in front of an old piano that took up half of their tiny living room. The piano was a monster of a thing, with chipped ivory keys and a dark wooden body that had seen better days. Her father had brought it home one afternoon when she was 5 years old, pulled from an estate sale where nobody else wanted it. The instrument was in terrible shape. 3 keys on the left side didn't make any sound at all. The middle C stuck every time you pressed it, and you had to wiggle it back up with your finger. Some of the higher notes sounded tinny and wrong, like they were playing a slightly different song than the rest. But to Elena, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. Nobody taught her how to play. Her parents couldn't afford lessons, and the one music teacher in town charged more per hour than her father made in a day. So Elena taught herself. She found old sheet music at garage sales, watched whatever videos she could load on their slow internet connection, and spent every spare moment at that broken piano, figuring out one note at a time how to make music. Her mother would sometimes stand in the doorway, watching her daughter's small hands move across those damaged keys, tears in her eyes. She knew Elena had something special, something that went beyond their small house and their small town. But she also knew that talent without opportunity was like a seed without water. By the time Elena turned 16, she had won every local competition there was to win. The town's annual talent show, the regional youth music festival, even the state fair competition where she competed against kids who had grand pianos and years of expensive training. She won them all, playing on borrowed pianos that were always better than the broken one at home, but somehow never felt quite right under her fingers. That's when the letter came. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in a thick cream envelope with fancy lettering on the front. Elena's hands shook as she opened it, standing right there by the mailbox in the drizzling rain. The Westmont Conservatory, one of the most prestigious music schools in the entire country, was holding their annual scholarship competition, and they were inviting her to audition. She read the letter 3 times before she believed it was real. Someone had sent them a video of her performance at the state fair. Someone thought she was good enough to compete with the best young musicians in the country. Someone believed in her. Her father closed the repair shop early that day. They celebrated with takeout pizza, the expensive kind from the place in the nice part of town that they usually only ordered from on birthdays. Elena could barely eat. Her mind was already racing, thinking about what piece she would play, how she would prepare, what it would be like to walk into a place like the Westmont Conservatory. The next few months were the hardest she had ever worked. She practiced 6, 7, sometimes 8 hours a day. Her fingers developed calluses. She memorized pieces so thoroughly that she could play them in her sleep. She learned to work around every flaw in her piano, knew exactly which keys to avoid, which ones needed extra pressure, how to make broken sound like intentional. Her teachers at school noticed the change. She fell asleep in history class twice. Her grades in math slipped a little. But her music teacher, old Mr. Rodriguez, who had taught at the high school for 30 years, pulled her aside one day after class. "You're really doing this, aren't you?" he asked, his weathered face serious. "You're really going for it?" Elena nodded, suddenly feeling very small and very young. "Good," he said and smiled. "Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong there. You're as good as any of them. Better than most, I'd wager." But as the day of the competition got closer, Elena started to understand what she was really walking into. She looked up the other competitors online. There was Victoria Chun, whose parents were both professional musicians and who had been playing since she was 3. There was David Kowalski, who had already performed with 2 symphony orchestras and had his own Wikipedia page. There was Priya Sharma, who studied at a private academy that cost more per year than Elena's family made in 5. These weren't just talented kids. These were prodigies from wealthy families with every advantage money could buy. They had perfect pianos, private tutors, connections, and opportunities that Elena could only dream about. They wore expensive clothes and talked about summer programs in Europe like they were nothing special. Elena looked at her reflection in the mirror the night before she left for the competition. She saw a girl in a borrowed dress, with calloused fingers and eyes that had seen too many late nights. She thought about backing out, about calling the conservatory and telling them there had been a mistake, that she didn't really belong there, but then she sat down at her broken piano one last time. She played the piece she had chosen for the competition, Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor, a piece people said was too difficult, too advanced, too ambitious for someone her age. She played it on that damaged instrument with its stuck keys and out-of-tune notes, and somehow it sounded exactly right. The next morning, her parents drove her to the city. It was a 3-hour drive through countryside that gradually gave way to suburbs and then to tall buildings and busy streets. The Westmont Conservatory sat in the heart of the city, a beautiful old building with marble columns and huge windows that seemed to glow from the inside. Elena got out of the car with her small suitcase and stood looking up at the building. Other students were arriving too, pulling up in expensive cars with their parents, carrying multiple bags, laughing and calling out to friends they knew from previous competitions. Nobody looked at her twice. She was just another girl with a suitcase, unremarkable and easy to overlook. And as she watched a group of students walk past, one of them laughing at something on her phone while the others gathered around, Elena heard a name that made her stomach drop. "That's the scholarship girl," one of them whispered, not as quietly as they thought. "Can you believe they're letting someone like that compete with us?" Elena felt her face get hot. She picked up her suitcase and walked toward the entrance, head held high even though her heart was pounding. She had come too far to turn back now. She had worked too hard to let whispers and stares stop her. Whatever happened in this competition, she was going to show them all exactly what a girl with a broken piano could do. The inside of the Westmont Conservatory was even more intimidating than the outside. The floors were polished marble that clicked under Elena's worn shoes. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings so high they made her dizzy to look at. And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, there was music. Piano scales drifting from practice rooms, violin melodies floating down staircases. The distant sound of someone singing in a language Elena didn't recognize. She found her way to the registration desk, where a woman with silver hair and glasses looked at her over a clipboard. The woman's eyes traveled from Elena's face down to her simple clothes and back up again, and Elena saw something flicker in her expression. Pity, maybe. Or doubt. Name? The woman asked, Elena Santos. The woman's finger traced down the list, then stopped. "Ah, yes, the scholarship candidate. You'll be in Dormitory C, room 14. The competition schedule is in your packet. Your performance slot will be announced tomorrow morning." She handed Elena a thick manila envelope without quite meeting her eyes. Elena took the packet and made her way through the building, following signs to the dormitories. She passed groups of students who all seemed to know each other, talking about summer programs in Vienna and master classes with people whose names Elena had only read about in books. Nobody spoke to her. Nobody even seemed to notice her room 14 was small but clean, with 2 beds and 2 desks. One side was already claimed, covered with expensive luggage and a laptop that probably cost more than Elena's family's car. Her roommate, wherever she was, clearly traveled in style. Elena unpacked her single suitcase, hanging up the one good dress she owned for the performance. Her hands were shaking slightly. This was really happening. In less than 2 days, she would be playing on a stage in front of judges who could change her entire life. That evening, there was a welcome dinner in the conservatory's grand hall. Long tables were set with white tablecloths and more forks than Elena knew what to do with. She found a seat near the end of one table, trying to make herself invisible. "Is this seat taken?" Elena looked up to see a tall girl with perfectly styled hair standing over her. Before Elena could answer, the girl sat down, followed by 2 others. They were all beautiful in that effortless way that came from money and confidence. "I'm Victoria," the tall girl said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Victoria Chun, and you must be the scholarship girl everyone's been talking about. Elena's stomach tightened. My name is Elena. Of course it is. Victoria exchanged a look with her friends. So tell us, Elena, where exactly did you train? I don't recognize your academy. I didn't go to an academy. I taught myself. The three girls stared at her for a moment, then burst into laughter. Not mean laughter, exactly, but the kind that made Elena feel like she was the punchline to a joke she didn't understand. You taught yourself? One of Victoria's friends repeated. That's adorable. Really it is. Must be nice to be so confident. Victoria leaned in, her voice dropping to something almost kind. Listen, I'm sure you're very talented for someone from your background. But you do understand what you're up against here, right? These judges have heard the best of the best. They can tell the difference between natural talent and real training. Elena felt heat rising in her cheeks. I've won every competition I've entered. Local competitions, Victoria said, waving her hand dismissively. That's sweet, really. But this is different. This is the real world. She stood up, her friends following. Good luck tomorrow. You're going to need it. They walked away, leaving Elena sitting alone at the end of the table, her appetite completely gone. She pushed her food around her plate for another few minutes, then excused herself and went back to her room. She didn't sleep well that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Victoria's voice, saw that pitying smile. Maybe they were right. Maybe she had been fooling herself all along, thinking she could compete with people who had everything. The next morning, the performance schedule was posted in the main hall. A crowd of students gathered around it, pushing and jostling to see who would play when. Elena waited until the crowd thinned before checking her slot. Her heart sank. She was last. The very last performer of the entire competition. Being last could be good or bad. Good because the judges would remember you. Bad because they'd also be tired, impatient, ready to be done. And everyone else would already have played their best. The bar would be set impossibly high. The day crawled by. Elena tried to practice, but every practice room seemed to be occupied. She walked the halls, listening to pieces of other people's rehearsals leaking through doorways. They all sounded incredible. Flawless technique, perfect timing, the kind of playing that came from years of expert instruction. That afternoon, she finally found an empty practice room. The piano inside was beautiful, a glossy black grand that probably cost more than her house. She sat down at it, placed her fingers on the keys, and froze. It was too perfect. Too smooth, too responsive, too easy. Her fingers didn't know what to do with keys that actually worked the way they were supposed to. Every note came out exactly as written, with none of the adjustments and compensations she had spent years learning. It felt wrong, like wearing someone else's shoes. She practiced for 2 hours, trying to get comfortable, but the unease never left. This wasn't her piano. This wasn't her music. This was someone else's world. And she was just a visitor who didn't know the rules. The day of the competition arrived with gray skies and a cold wind that rattled the conservatory's tall windows. Elena woke up early, her stomach in knots. She could hear other students in the halls, their voices high with nervous energy. The performances began at 9 in the morning. Elena sat in the audience, watching one extraordinary pianist after another take the stage. They played pieces she recognized and pieces she'd never heard before, their fingers flying across the keys with practiced precision. The audience applauded politely after each one. The judges took notes, their faces revealing nothing. Victoria played midway through the day. Her piece was technically perfect, every note exactly where it should be, her posture and hand position textbook ideal. The audience gave her a standing ovation. She bowed gracefully, then walked offstage with that same confident smile Elena had seen at dinner. As the afternoon wore on and performer after performer finished, Elena felt her anxiety growing. She was next. After one more pianist, it would be her turn. Finally, the second-to-last performer finished to enthusiastic applause. Elena stood up from her seat in the audience, her legs shaky. A stage manager met her in the wings. "You're up next, Miss Santos," he said. Go ahead and take your place." Elena walked onto that huge stage, the lights bright in her eyes. The sea of faces in the audience just shapes in the darkness beyond. And there, center stage, sat the piano she would play. Her heart dropped into her stomach. It was old. Really old. The bench was slightly uneven. And as she sat down and looked at the keys, she could immediately see the problems. Several keys had chips in them. The finish was worn in places. She pressed middle C experimentally, and it stuck. Just like the one at home. From somewhere in the audience, she heard a barely suppressed giggle. Then another. A whisper that carried in the silent hall. Did they really give her that one? Elena's hands hovered over the keys. She looked out into the audience and saw Victoria in the front row, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes gleaming with something that looked a lot like triumph. They had done this on purpose. Someone had made sure she got the worst piano in the building. They wanted her to fail. They wanted to prove that the scholarship girl didn't belong here. One of the judges, an elderly woman with kind eyes, started to stand up, probably to offer a different piano. But something inside Elena snapped. All the whispers, all the pitying looks, all the casual cruelty of the past 2 days came together into something hard and bright and furious. She raised her hand, stopping the judge. Her voice came out clear and strong, carrying to every corner of that hall. "I'll play this one." The silence in the hall was absolute. Elena could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her back, waiting to see what the scholarship girl would do with a broken piano. Waiting to watch her fail, she took a deep breath and placed her hands on the keys. They felt familiar under her fingers. The chipped ivory, the slight resistance, the way some keys felt looser than others. This piano wasn't so different from the one she had learned on. The one she had spent 11 years fighting with, adapting to, making music with despite all its flaws. Maybe this wasn't sabotage. Maybe this was coming home. Elena closed her eyes. In her mind, she saw her tiny living room with its rain-stained ceiling. She saw her father in his work clothes, standing in the doorway after a long day. She saw her mother's tears the first time Elena played something beautiful on that broken instrument. She saw Mr. Rodriguez's weathered face telling her she was good enough. She pressed the first note. The opening of Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor is supposed to be ominous, like bells tolling in the distance. On this damaged piano, with its slightly hollow tone, it sounded even more haunting than usual. Elena let the sound hang in the air for a moment, then continued. The piece demanded quick runs up and down the keyboard, passages where her fingers had to move faster than thought. On a normal piano, this was already difficult. On this one, it should have been impossible. But Elena knew something these other pianists didn't. She knew how to listen. When she reached the first problematic key, the one that barely made sound, she didn't panic. She simply shifted the melody slightly, moved the note to a neighboring key, changed the chord just enough that it still made sense. The alteration was so smooth, so musical, that unless you had the sheet music in front of you, you'd never know she hadn't played exactly what Rachmaninoff wrote. In the audience, people started to lean forward in their seats. Elena kept playing. The piece built in intensity, growing louder and more demanding. Another dead key appeared in her path. This time she didn't avoid it. She played it anyway, letting the silence become part of the rhythm, turning the gap into a dramatic pause that made the next note hit even harder. The out-of-tune keys were scattered throughout the middle register, right where the melody lived. On a normal piano, this would ruin the piece. But Elena had spent years learning to hear not just what was, but what could be. She used those sour notes sparingly, deliberately, placing them at moments of tension in the music. The slight dissonance made the piece sound darker, more uncertain, more human. It was like she was having a conversation with the piano. It would throw an obstacle at her, and she would catch it and turn it into something beautiful. The piano resisted, and she insisted. Together, they created something that had never existed before. The elderly judge who had tried to stand earlier now sat completely still, her pen frozen above her notepad. Tears were forming in her eyes. Elena reached the middle section of the piece, where Rachmaninoff wrote soaring melodies that were supposed to sound like singing. This was the hardest part, the part that separated decent pianists from great ones. The sticky keys were clustered here, threatening to destroy the flowing lines, but Elena had been playing sticky keys her entire life. Her fingers knew exactly how much pressure to use, how to coax sound from reluctant hammers, how to time each note so the delays became part of the music rather than interruptions. She played through the section like she was painting with watercolors, letting some edges blur while keeping others sharp. In the front row, Victoria's smirk had completely vanished. Her mouth hung slightly open, her eyes wide. She looked like she was watching something impossible happen right in front of her. The piece moved into its final section, building toward the powerful, crashing conclusion. This was where pianists were supposed to show their strength, their technical brilliance, their complete control of the instrument. Elena's hands flew across the keys, avoiding the broken ones, embracing the stuck ones, dancing around the out-of-tune ones like she had choreographed. This exact performance on this exact piano, sweat dripped down her back. Her arms ached from the force of the chords. But she didn't stop, didn't slow down, didn't hesitate for even a fraction of a second. Every note she played was a statement. Every phrase was a declaration. This was who she was. This was what she could do. And no amount of sabotage, no amount of prejudice, no amount of wealth or privilege or perfect pianos could take this away from her. She struck the final chord with everything she had. The sound rang out through the hall, that broken piano singing louder than it probably had in years. And then silence. Elena sat frozen at the bench, her hands still on the keys, her chest heaving. She didn't dare turn around. She didn't want to see the faces in the audience, didn't want to know what they thought. For a moment she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. If her adaptations had been too obvious, if everyone could tell she had changed the piece, then she heard it. A single person clapping. Elena turned her head slightly and saw the elderly judge on her feet, applauding with her hands high above her head. The woman's face was wet with tears, but she was smiling, really smiling, like she had just witnessed something miraculous. For another heartbeat, no one else moved. The hall remained silent except for that one pair of hands clapping. Then, like a dam breaking, the entire audience rose to their feet. The sound was deafening. Applause crashed over Elena in waves, mixed with shouts and cheers. People weren't just clapping politely like they had for the other performers. They were celebrating, whooping, some of them openly crying. The applause went on, echoing off the high ceilings, filling every corner of that grand hall. Elena stood up on shaky legs and bowed, the way she had practiced in her bedroom mirror. But this wasn't like she had imagined. This was bigger, more overwhelming, more real. Her vision blurred with tears and she blinked them away quickly, not wanting to cry in front of all these people. When she finally looked at the audience, she saw expressions she would remember for the rest of her life. The elderly judge was still standing, still crying, still applauding. Other judges had joined her, their professional composure completely abandoned. Students who had ignored her in the halls were on their feet, some of them looking stunned, others looking at her with something that might have been respect, and Victoria. Victoria stood in the front row, her hands clapping mechanically, her face pale. She looked like someone who had just watched their entire worldview crumble. Her friends stood beside her, equally shocked. Their earlier confidence completely evaporated, but Elena's eyes moved past all of them, searching the back of the hall until she found what she was looking for. Her parents. Her father in his work jacket, her mother with her hand over her mouth. They were crying too, holding on to each other, their faces glowing with pride and love and relief. Elena smiled at them. Really smiled, the first genuine smile she'd had since arriving at this place. Then she turned and walked off the stage, her legs trembling so badly she wasn't sure they would hold her. The moment she reached the wings, out of sight of the audience, her knees gave out. She caught herself against the wall, breathing hard, her whole body shaking with the release of tension and adrenaline and emotion. A stage manager rushed over, asking if she needed water or a chair, but Elena couldn't speak. She could only shake her head. She had done it. On their worst piano, with their mockery ringing in her ears, With every advantage stacked against her, she had done it. She had played not just well, but beautifully. She had taken their cruelty and turned it into art. The applause was still going. Through the stage curtains, Elena could hear it continuing, wave after wave of sound that showed no sign of stopping. The stage manager looked confused, checking his watch, clearly unsure if he should send someone out to quiet the audience so the judges could deliberate. Elena pressed her back against the cool wall and closed her eyes. Whatever happened next, whatever the judges decided, nobody could take this moment away from her. For 5 minutes on that stage, playing that broken piano, she had been exactly who she was meant to be. And everyone in that hall had seen it. The applause finally died down after nearly 5 minutes. Elena could hear the murmur of voices from the auditorium, excited chatter that sounded different from the polite conversations after the other performances. Something had shifted in that room. She could feel it even from backstage. A woman with a headset approached her. "Miss Santos, the judges would like you to wait in the green room while they deliberate. Can you walk? Do you need anything?" Elena nodded and pushed herself off the wall. Her legs felt like jelly, but they held. She followed the woman down a corridor to a small room with comfortable chairs and a table with water bottles and snacks. The woman left, closing the door quietly behind her, alone for the first time since her performance. Elena sank into one of the chairs. Her hands were still trembling. She looked down at her fingers, at the calluses she had earned from years of practice, and a laugh bubbled up in her throat. It came out half laugh, half sob, and suddenly she was crying, really crying. All the tension and fear and relief pouring out of her at once. She didn't know how long she sat there. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour. Time felt strange and elastic. Eventually there was a soft knock on the door. "Come in," Elena said, wiping her eyes quickly. The door opened and the elderly judge stepped inside. Up close, Elena could see she was probably in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that crinkled at the corners. She was still holding her notepad, but the pages were blank except for a few scribbled words. "I hope I'm not intruding," the woman said. "I'm Dr. Eleanor Chun. I wanted to speak with you before the official announcement." Elena stood up quickly. "Of course. Yes. Thank you." Dr. Chun smiled and gestured for Elena to sit back down. She took the chair across from her. "I've been judging this competition for 23 years, she said. "I've heard thousands of young pianists play. Many of them were technically perfect. Some of them were quite good. A handful were truly talented." She paused and her eyes grew distant, like she was looking at something far away. "But what you did out there today I've only seen maybe twice in my entire career. Do you understand what made it special?" Elena shook her head, not trusting her voice. "You didn't just play the piano," Dr. Chun said. "You had a conversation with it. Most pianists, they approach an instrument like it's a tool, something to be mastered and controlled. But you treated that broken piano like a partner. When it resisted, you listened. When it couldn't do what you asked, you adapted. You turned its limitations into possibilities." She leaned forward, her expression intense. "That's not something you can teach. Elena, that's not something that comes from lessons or practice rooms or expensive academies. That's musicianship. Real musicianship. And it's rarer than you know." Elena felt fresh tears threatening. "I just played the only way I know how." "Exactly," Dr. Chun said. "And that's what made it beautiful." She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "The judges are almost finished deliberating. It shouldn't be much longer. But I wanted you to know, regardless of what happens, that what you did today mattered. You reminded everyone in that hall why we love music in the first place." After Dr. Chun left, Elena sat in the quiet room, her mind spinning. She had never thought about her playing the way Dr. Chun described it. She had always just thought she was making do, working around problems, finding solutions. It had never occurred to her that her limitations might actually be a strength. Another knock came at the door. This time it was the stage manager. "They're ready for you, Miss Santos." Everyone's gathering back in the auditorium for the announcement. Elena's stomach flipped. This was it. In a few minutes she would know if all of this had been worth it. The auditorium felt different when she walked back in. The other competitors were already seated, but they turned to look at her as she entered. Some smiled. Others looked away quickly. Victoria sat very straight in her seat, staring forward. Refusing to meet Elena's eyes, Elena found a seat near the back, next to a boy who had performed early in the day. He leaned over and whispered, "That was incredible. I've never seen anything like it." "Thanks," Elena whispered back, surprised. The head judge, a tall man with gray hair, took the stage. "Thank you all for your patience," he said into the microphone. "This year's competition was exceptional. The level of talent we witnessed today was truly remarkable." He went on, talking about the conservatory's history and mission, but Elena couldn't focus on his words. Her heart was beating too fast. She felt lightheaded. "The judges deliberated carefully," the man continued. "We considered technical skill, artistic interpretation, stage presence, and musicality. And I'm pleased to announce that we reached a unanimous decision in less than 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That was fast." Elena didn't know if that was good or bad. This year's full scholarship, including a private study grant with Dr. Eleanor Chun, goes to Miss Elena Santos. For a moment, Elena's brain couldn't process the words. They seemed to float in the air, not quite connecting to meaning. Then the auditorium erupted in applause again, and the boy next to her was shaking her shoulder, grinning, and people were turning to look at her with smiles and congratulations. She stood up, on numb legs, as the head judge beckoned her forward. The walk to the stage felt like it took forever and no time at all. Her parents were somewhere in the audience. She could hear her mother crying, but she couldn't find them in the sea of faces. The judge shook her hand on stage, and someone handed her a folder with the scholarship papers and a small trophy. She stood there, blinking in the lights, not sure what to say or do. "Would you like to say a few words?" the judge asked. Elena looked out at the audience. She saw the other competitors, some clapping genuinely, others looking stunned. She saw Dr. Chun, beaming with pride. She saw her parents, finally, standing in the back, her father's arm around her mother's shoulders. "I just want to thank everyone who believed in me," she said, her voice shaking. "Especially the people from home who told me I could do this, even when I didn't believe it myself." She paused, looking down at the trophy in her hands. "And I want to say that you don't need perfect conditions to make something beautiful. Sometimes the broken things teach us the most." The applause started again as she walked off stage. But this time, Elena didn't go backstage. She walked straight into the audience, toward her parents. Her mother pulled her into a crushing hug, sobbing into her shoulder. Her father's eyes were wet too, though he tried to hide it. "I'm so proud of you," her mother whispered. So proud." Other students came up to congratulate her. Some seemed sincere, others just going through the motions. Elena accepted all of it with as much grace as she could manage, still feeling like she was floating outside her own body. Then she saw Victoria approaching, and Elena's stomach tightened. Victoria's two friends hung back, but Victoria came forward alone. Her perfect makeup couldn't quite hide that she had been crying. "Congratulations," Victoria said, and her voice was stiff, formal. "Thank you," Elena replied. "Not sure what else to say." Victoria looked down at her expensive shoes. "I need to tell you something. The piano, they gave you that piano because I asked them to." She looked up, and there was genuine shame in her eyes. "I thought it would be funny. I thought you'd embarrass yourself and prove that you didn't belong here." The admission hung between them. Elena waited, letting Victoria finish. "I was wrong," Victoria said quietly. "I was jealous and cruel and wrong. What you did out there, I couldn't have done that in a million years. Not with all my lessons and all my advantages." She took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix what I did, but I'm sorry." Elena looked at this girl who had tried to sabotage her, who had mocked her, who had wanted her to fail. She could have said something cutting, something to make Victoria feel worse. Part of her wanted to, but she thought about what Dr. Chun had said about turning limitations into possibilities, about listening instead of fighting. "We all make mistakes," Elena said finally. The important thing is what we do after. Victoria nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Thank you. I don't deserve your kindness, but thank you. She turned and walked away quickly, her shoulders shaking. Elena's mother squeezed her hand. That was very mature of you. I'm too tired to be angry, Elena admitted. And honestly, if they had given me a perfect piano, I don't know if I would have played as well. That broken piano felt like coming home. Her father laughed, wiping his eyes. Only you would say something like that. As the crowd began to disperse, Elena found herself standing in that grand auditorium, scholarship papers in one hand, her mother's hand in the other. She thought about her tiny house with the rain-stained ceiling. She thought about the broken piano that had taught her everything she knew. She thought about all the people who had doubted her, and all the people who had believed, and she realized that this wasn't just about winning a competition. It was about proving to herself that she belonged anywhere she chose to be, broken piano or not. The weeks after the competition passed in a blur. Elena moved into the conservatory's student housing and began her classes. The other students treated her differently now. Some with respect, others with curiosity, a few with lingering resentment. But nobody ignored her anymore. Dr. Chun became her mentor, just as the scholarship promised. Their first private lesson was in a small practice room with tall windows that looked out over the city. Dr. Chun sat in a chair, while Elena warmed up, her experienced ears catching things Elena didn't even know she was doing. You have remarkable intuition, Dr. Chun said after Elena finished a scale, but there are gaps in your technical foundation. Things you taught yourself that work, but could work better. Are you open to rebuilding some of your approach from the ground up? Elena nodded. I want to learn everything. And she did learn. Dr. Chun was demanding but patient, breaking down pieces Elena thought she knew and showing her new ways to understand them. Some days were frustrating. Elena would play something the way she had always played it, and Dr. Chun would stop her, make her do it differently. It felt wrong at first, uncomfortable, like wearing shoes on the wrong feet, but slowly, things started to click. Her technique became cleaner. Her interpretations deepened. She learned the theory behind the instincts she had developed on her broken piano at home. It was like she had been speaking a language her whole life and was now learning to read and write in it. One afternoon, about a month after she started classes, Dr. Chen stopped her in the middle of a Chopin nocturne. Do you know what happened to that piano? Dr. Chen asked. The one you played in the competition? Elena shook her head. The conservatory was going to have it hauled away the next week. It was scheduled for disposal. Too expensive to repair, they said. Dr. Chen smiled. But after your performance, I convinced them to keep it. It's in storage now, but I have plans for it. What kind of plans? Elena asked. You'll see, Dr. Chen said mysteriously. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening beyond the conservatory walls. Someone in the audience had recorded Elena's performance on their phone. The video quality wasn't great. The angle was from the side, but the audio captured everything. That person posted it online with the title, Scholarship Student Plays Broken Piano and Brings Judges to Tears. The video went viral. Elena didn't know about it at first. She was too busy with classes and practice to pay attention to social media. But one morning she woke up to dozens of messages from people back home. Friends from high school, neighbors, people she barely knew, all sending her links to the video. She watched it on her phone, sitting on her bed in the early morning light. It was strange seeing herself from the outside, seeing what everyone else had seen. The camera caught the moment she sat down and discovered the broken keys. It captured her raised hand, her declaration that she would play anyway. And it recorded every note of what came after. The comment section had thousands of entries. People from all over the world sharing the video, talking about how it made them cry, how it reminded them why they loved music. Professional musicians weighed in, analyzing her technique, praising her adaptability. Some comments made her laugh. Others made her tear up. One comment stood out. It was from a music teacher in a small town across the country. I've been teaching piano for 30 years. I have students who want to quit because they don't have fancy instruments or expensive lessons. I'm going to show them this video and tell them that greatness isn't about what you have. It's about what you do with it. Within a week, the video had 5 million views, then 10 million. Then 20. News websites picked up the story. Teen pianist turns sabotage into triumph, the headlines read. Broken piano, unbroken spirit. A reporter from a major newspaper called the conservatory asking for an interview. Then a local TV station. Then a national morning show. The conservatory's communications office was overwhelmed. Dr. Chun called Elena into her office. "You're not obligated to do any of these interviews," she said. "Your job is to study and grow as a musician. But this kind of attention could open doors for you. The choice is yours." Elena thought about it. Part of her wanted to hide from all the attention, to just focus on her music. But she remembered that comment from the teacher about showing the video to students who wanted to quit. "I'll do a few," she said. "If it helps other people, it's worth it." The interviews were awkward at first. Elena wasn't used to talking about herself, wasn't comfortable with people calling her inspirational. But she got better at it. She learned to tell her story simply, to focus on what mattered, that everyone faces obstacles, and those obstacles don't have to stop you. The attention brought unexpected opportunities. A prestigious summer music festival invited her to perform. A concert hall in a major city asked if she would play in their Emerging Artist series. A piano manufacturer reached out, interested in sponsoring her. That last one led to a conversation with Dr. Chun and the conservatory's director in a formal office with leather chairs and dark wood paneling. "The Steinberg Piano Company has made a very generous offer," the director said. "They want to give you one of their concert grand pianos. Top of the line, worth about $150,000. Elena's mouth dropped open. She had never even touched a piano that expensive. "There's one condition," the director continued. "They want to do it as a public event. A ceremony, press coverage, the whole thing. It's good publicity for them and for the conservatory." "What do you think?" Elena asked Dr. Chun. "I think, Dr. Chun said slowly, that you should accept it. But I also think you should make a condition of your own." Elena understood immediately what her mentor was suggesting. "The broken piano," she said. "From the competition," Dr. Chun smiled. "Exactly." 2 weeks later, there was a ceremony in the conservatory's main hall. The Steinberg Company's CEO was there, along with reporters and photographers and a crowd of students and faculty. A beautiful piano sat on the stage, its polished surface gleaming under the lights. Elena gave a short speech, thanking Steinberg for their generosity. Then she made her request. "This piano is incredible," she said, running her hand along its smooth edge. "And I'm honored to receive it. But I'd like to ask Steinberg to do one more thing. There's another piano here, an old one that was used in the competition. It's broken and probably not worth much. But it means something to me, and I think it could mean something to other students. I'd like Steinberg to restore it and donate it to a music program in an underprivileged community, a place where kids don't have access to instruments or lessons, so they can learn the same way I did." The CEO looked surprised, then thoughtful. He conferred briefly with his colleagues. "We can do that," he said finally. "In fact, we'll do better than that. We'll restore the piano, and we'll also provide funding for that music program. Instruments, teaching materials, whatever they need." The applause that followed was genuine and warm. Later, after the ceremony ended and the reporters left, Dr. Chun found Elena sitting at her new piano, playing softly. "That was a good thing you did," Dr. Chun said. "It felt right," Elena replied. "That broken piano gave me so much. It should get a chance to help someone else." 6 months later, Elena traveled back to a city not far from her hometown for a special event. The restored competition piano had been given to an after-school music program that served kids from low-income families. The program had been struggling, operating out of a church basement with donated keyboards and volunteer teachers. Elena performed a short concert for the kids and their families. She played on the restored piano, which looked and sounded beautiful after Steinberg's craftsmen had worked their magic. But she also told them the story of how it had been broken, how she had played it anyway, how its flaws had taught her to listen and adapt. After the concert, kids lined up to try the piano. A girl about 10 years old, with nervous hands and bitten fingernails, sat down and played a simple melody she had learned. She made mistakes, hit wrong notes, had to start over twice. But her face was glowing. "It's a nice piano," the girl said shyly to Elena. "It is now," Elena agreed. "But it wasn't always, and you know what? You don't need a nice piano to be a good musician. You just need to practice and listen and never give up." The girl nodded seriously, like Elena had told her a secret. As Elena watched more children take turns at the piano, she thought about how far she had come. From that tiny house with the rain-stained ceiling to the Westmont Conservatory. From teaching herself on broken keys to studying with one of the best pianists in the world. From being the ignored scholarship girl to someone whose story inspired people she would never meet. But the thing that made her happiest wasn't the viral video or the beautiful new piano or even winning the competition. It was knowing that somewhere, right now, there was probably a kid sitting at a broken instrument, learning to make music despite the obstacles. Learning that limitations could become strengths. Learning that you don't need perfect conditions to create something beautiful. Victoria had reached out a few weeks earlier, sending a long email apologizing again and sharing that she had started volunteering at the same type of program. "Watching you made me realize I've been taking everything for granted," Victoria wrote. "I want to help kids who actually need it, not just compete for prizes I don't even